Let's talk a little bit about how the domain and range are related to the graph. Now, if you remember the basic definitions, the domain is a set of all input values that you can put into your function, right? And your range is a set of all output values. So we can see exactly what the domain and range are from the graph. For example, the domain for this, all we have to do is kind of trace a shadow back to the x-axis wherever this graph is. Like you notice, all of this space on the x-axis is occupied by this graph, right? So that means your domain ought to go from about here to about here. So it looks like in this case, the domain should be about negative 4.8 to about 4.2, and I'm just guesstimating those numbers. And I'm putting brackets on both ends of this because I have solid dots, not hollow ones on the end. So let's take a look at the range. Here's a copy of the same function. Remember, the range is the outputs, right? So all I have to do in this case is look at the y values that are taken on. So if I trace this over to the y-axis, notice I have to go all the way down there. Every y value that's ever taken on has to be included in the range. So it looks to me like on this one, the range should be what? It looks like about negative 2.9 to positive 3, because that's where I'm going from here on the y-axis to here on the y-axis. So let's try and get the domain of this function. Now, we don't know what it is, it's just the graph of y equals f of x. Now, we know we're supposed to kind of cast a shadow onto the x-axis, right? So let's draw that in. Now you notice we've got a hole in it here, right? So there's nothing between these 2 points. You got a function defined here, and it looks like it goes over to about 3 on the other side. Again, there's a gap, right? Because I've got all this filled in. There's a gap here, but then everything is filled in between these 2 points. So let's make sure we got the domain labeled properly. So we got a closed circle on this end, we got an open circle on this end, and everything's filled in between. Now you notice the function's defined at least one place in here. It's open here, but it's closed here. So it's closed. This is a closed circle. So we're going to have brackets on both ends of this one. Over here, it's open on both ends. So I'm going to have another interval. So that means my domain is going to be the union of 3 things, right? So here, domain is going to be, what are these numbers? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It looks like it goes from negative 8 to negative 5, with parentheses on that. Union looks like it goes from negative 4 to 3, brackets on both of those. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So it looks like it goes from 6 to 9 on that, with parentheses on both ends. Let's do the range for the same function. Now remember, for the range, instead of looking at the x values, what I'm looking at is the y values, right? Because instead of inputs, I'm looking at outputs. So what I need to do now is trace onto the y-axis everything that comes over, right? So it looks like I go from here to here. I've got one value that shows up here. I've got everything starting at this bottom value going up to this top value. And then I've got everything that comes over from this right-hand part. So the key is, from here, can I figure out what the shadow cast on the y-axis is? So just look at the top and the bottom. Like you notice these 2 pieces overlap a little bit, right? So we go all the way from a solid circle here to an open circle here. And we've actually got everything in between. Some of it's on the left, some of it's on the right, but all of those values do show up as output values. We've got a value sitting by itself here at positive 1. And you notice this open circle doesn't make any difference, right? Because the bottom of the range, it's a solid circle here because this value is taken on, and it's a solid circle here because this value is taken on. So it's everything in between. So let's see if we can break down our range into 3 different pieces again. So I believe this is negative 10 to 10. So it looks like our range goes from negative 8 with a bracket because that's a solid circle to negative 1 with the parentheses because this is from a hollow circle. Union. How do you put 1 in a set by itself? You just put it in curly braces. So there's a singleton set that's got 1 in it. Union. What else do I have? Looks like I'm going from 3 to 7, and that is going to be brackets on both ends. So there's my range for the same function.